Oh man, that's tongue.
Pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Most gracious Heavenly Father, God, we just come before your throne right now. God, we just pray for wisdom today and the decisions that we make for these men and women who put their lives on the line every single day. God, give us the knowledge that we need, the discernment to be wise about the decisions that we make to better serve them. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
roll call, please.
Andre Lovin. Here. Frank Besson.
Here.
Amy Matthews. Here. Stephen LaFleur.
Here.
Kevin Marcel.
Here.
Thurman Miller.
Here.
Senator Peacock. Representative Pearson. Marsha Pressburg. Jay O'Quinn.
Here.
And Bobby Smith.
Here.
We do have a quorum.
Thank you. For those of you who have not met Jay O'Quinn, Jay is the new president of the Troop Association. Obviously, the student trustee on our board. So welcome, Jay, and we get to see you around pretty often.
Frank, are you going to use the normal decorum and let Jay make his welcoming address?
Absolutely, we got it.
I didn't have a man That's all he needs.
Jay works in our hazmat section of state police. He's been with state police for
19 years.
19
Last
years.
week.
Yeah.
So you're in Baton Rouge?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
He actually lives in
Live in Mandeville.
Mandeville.
Oh, all right.
We make that commute every morning.
My husband lives in Covington, so
Okay.
I understand. It's a long weekend.
All right, moving on to election of chairman and vice chairman. Aren't we supposed to, public comments? We can supposed to be over here somewhere in the time?
Yes.
Public comments, anybody? Good. All right. Election of chairman and vice chairman.
To make a motion.
And
Frank stay as chairman.
I second that.
motion by Stephen, a second by Bobby for myself to stay chairman. Is there any objections? See none, so moved. Thank you all very much. I appreciate your confidence in me. Vice chairman.
Nominate Kevin.
Motion by Bobby to nominate Kevin Marcel. Second by Thurman. Any objection? See none, so moved. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Moving on to committee assignments. I think, as I said last year, I think we do a great job. I'm very proud of Ms. Amy and the investment committee. The investment committee, they do such a great job. However, I'd like to add Jay O'Quinn to the committee as well. And like Ms. Amy does an excellent job as the chairman of investment, and I'd like to keep it like it is, and also with the executive committee as it is as well.
Do we meet every other month?
Every other month.
It's on this schedule that I gave.
Ms. Amy has a rule, and if you get out of place, she smacks her fingers.
She asks questions you don't have answers.
How are you, ma'am?
It's fine. Sorry.
No, that's okay.
It was bad. We're at a big standstill. Oh, it's been like that all day. Yes. No, I'm staying on
All right, approval of minutes of the meeting. You can turn to tab 1, which is the board meeting from December 16, 2015. Everyone, if you have any comments?
Maybe just a couple of comments. First of all, under item number 4, the investment committee, Amy will cover the meeting that we had on January the 20th under the next tab. But at this meeting, we discussed the fact that we would be having an investment committee meeting in January of 2016 to interview 4 finalists for the International Growth Manager and to replace Aberdeen, and we did that, and Amy will report the results of that and the recommendation from the investment committee under the next tab. We also talked about our annual review of the managers. We reviewed every manager, we reviewed every individual who has a fiduciary obligation to this system, including our investment consultant. We interview and evaluate each of our money managers, our actuary, our custodial bank, and all people that had anything to do with our system. And for the most part, the reviews were very, very good this year. We didn't have a whole lot of issues to deal with there. But we do have those on file for anybody who wants to take a look at it. In addition, under item number 6, I'll just remind you that John L. Daniel from J.P. Morgan came and spoke to the board concerning the custodial services that J.P. Morgan has been providing to this system for probably close to 20 years now. And John L. indicated that J.P. Morgan was severing their relationship with the SEI company, which is the producer of the system that we're on, the SEI platform. And by October the 31st, we have to have all of our assets out of the SEI program there with J.P. Morgan, and that the total services would terminate at the end of December 2016. We will also have in this meeting some discussions later on about the custody search. We'll go over that along with some other priorities that we'll have this year. But we are looking at about 5 or 6 new firms to look at dealing with, and we'll have an RFP that Kim will send out this afternoon after our meeting, pending board approval that we go through with that process. So I wanted to remind you about that. And I think those were the main things I had highlighted. We'll talk a little bit more about the legislation, and Denise will cover all of those legislative bills. There's some mention of those bills that the board, that you're sponsoring as the board for the retirement system. And that is under item number 10 on page 9 at the bottom and at the top of page 11 there. So those things will take place this session, and Denise will cover them in just a little while. Other than that, Mr. Chairman, those are the only comments that I saw.
Any questions, discussion on the minutes from the December meeting? Can I get a motion to accept? Motion by Bob, second by Ms. Kevin. Any objections to the minutes, December 2015? I see none, so moved. Tab 2, executive committee minutes from January 7th. Motion going by that too, by the order?
Yeah. The executive committee meeting of January the 7th was held primarily to approve or consider the recommendation of the disability retirement benefit for Irving Paul Benoit. We had the recommendation from our doctor, Dr. Someka, and there were no objections to the finding, and the board, the executive committee rather did approve that and recommends that to the board here. The audit engagement letter is going to be a change this year. We have with us today Mike Caparata from Hines and Macalusa, who has been our outside auditor now for going on about 5 or 6 years, Mike?
Like 7, I think.
2, 3 year,
Yeah.
and one extension there, so I think you're right, 7 years. We've had Hines and Macalusa, enjoyed a great relationship with those guys, and in particular with Mike and his people there. But the state legislative auditor has made a decision that they're going to audit our system this year, and they will audit the school employees retirement system. They will be doing the actual audit themselves, and they notified us that the audit will change a little bit in terms of not just being a financial audit, but it will focus more on compliance control type issues to be sure that they feel comfortable with the controls that we had in place for our system. Now, I've got to be honest with you, normally somebody might be a little concerned about that, but one of the things we did early on when I came to work here was we hired Griffin and Associates as our outside accounting firm, and Kristen Lito will give her reports today. But one of the reasons to do that was because I felt, and Kim and I had talked a lot about this, we felt like we needed some additional professionalism in-house that we might not be able to give unless we hired an outside manager like Griffin and Associates. They report directly to you, the board, They do not report to me or to Kim. They give you complete control and authority over what they do and how they do it. And they should give you comfort to have, I think, additional outside eyes looking at how we do our business. And I think it's one of the reasons, Mike, why your job probably flows as smoothly as it does because of the job that Kristen and Stephen do. So we hate to see the relationship end this year, Mike, but I'm not sure it'll stay that way forever. But at the same time, I feel like it's a good opportunity to have a legislative board to come in, take a look at us and see if there's any things we can improve on. If they can help us to do a better job, that's kind of the way we'll approach it. We also mentioned several things in here on the second page here of the minutes. Talked about the upcoming session with the legislature and the agenda for the Louisiana Association of Business and Industry. We've certainly seen a lot of the bills that have now been filed that have come out of this agenda that the Louisiana Association of Business and Industry has in this session. Also talked a little bit with you about the transition plan for our actuary. We've got a lot of balls in the air that we're trying to juggle here right now with the custodial search going on. We've got an actuary that we have talked with. Charles Hall has been with us since the inception of our system, and even before then he was with us. But Charles had said he wanted to leave after this year. Charles has, after meeting with Frank and myself and talking with Kim also, he has decided he will stay on through 2017. And I think there's nobody that's upset about that. I think everybody likes to have Charles around. He's a great resource for us, not just here for you as the board, but he's an especially great resource down at the state capitol when the legislators look to him for his guidance and direction with actuarial matters concerning our system. So that's a good piece of information here. He will be continuing with us for another year. And then we talked a little bit about the two bills that we'll have in the session this year. Both of them have been properly advertised and have been underwritten by Senator Peacock with the Senate Retirement Committee, and Denise will discuss those bills with you today when we get to that in the regular session. So those are the things that we covered in the executive committee.
May I just make a suggestion on the legislative auditors coming in? And I've seen this in every audit we've been through with all the other systems I'm on. I would highly recommend that you get your policies and procedures up and running, or at least up to date or something, whatever, because that is when he says other stuff will be looked at.
That's the focus.
That's the focus. I mean, I think we saw it all happening with MERS, where they had none, and not only legislative auditors, but the outside auditors were saying, we're making this a point in their findings. So just
I think that has to be a part of the thought process when you've seen such bad information on municipal employees retirement system in particular, and perhaps a couple other systems that have weaker controls in place and policies that are not up to date, as you mentioned.
right, so
Good-
just a
good point.
suggestion.
Any questions or discussion on the executive committee minutes? Can I get a motion to accept? Motion by Kevin, second by Amy. Any objections to the minutes? The motion? See none, so move. On tab 3.
Okay,
Investment committee.
investment committee meeting, not much to say about it, but it was a long day. We had performance numbers from Rob, which got us through December, which we were, for the current month, down 1.69%. I'm sure Rob's going to be giving us January numbers. And then we had our presentations to replace Aberdeen, our international growth manager. There were 4 companies we had in: Wellington, William Blair, Strategic Global, and OFI. And after much discussion, we chose Wellington. We felt it's a younger firm, or I should say, it was a firm that we thought would look good and really complement our investments. So I'm sure Kim and Erwin are in the process of getting that paperwork signed and things changed on that. And then otherwise, in other business, we did have the establishments of goals, like Erwin said. Right now, we're looking for the global custodial search, which we have the RFP 99% ready to go out, and we're probably going to be looking at sometimes in March as far as interviews. So, you know, guys, especially who are on this committee, please try to keep these days open, because again, those are gonna be some a long day to do some interviewing. And then what we're hoping to do, I think, once we talked about it, is to try to get this thing done for June 30th end, so that we begin the new people in July 1. And that way, we'll have a full year with the new people, and not having anything with what was the name? JP Morgan, SEI, their system. So, that's gonna be really pertinent to do. And then in addition with what we're going to be reviewing mid-cap active versus passive, which has always been on our list, but this time we're going to look at it a little closer. Private equity allocation, we're going to be looking at doing more of that. Review the allocation to real estate, even bringing the international fund. And then just looking at our cash position, we're kind of cash heavy right now. We seem to be cash flowing, which not good is always a good situation to be in.
On the next page, there's an analysis of cash, if you want to look at it. Behind your minutes.
Look at that. Yeah, you see, we're, the monthly payroll, what we have to pay is 21 million, and we have about 33 million in there. So, I mean, we are cash flowing, which is great. Thank God for the addition of new troopers, for the raises. And so we are, at about 12 million plus, so we're gonna be looking at doing something with that.
Well, we actually have 43 million right now in cash. This analysis that you see in front of you, I just went back 6 months and tagged all the cash that we received, and then all the monthly payroll amounts, to let you know that over a 6-month period, we actually are 12 million to the good. So every 6 months, we've got another 12 million in cash, which is why over the years we've accumulated 43. So that's where we're at, is 43.
Well, and some of this has been sort of allocated to like private equity, which is slower to grab the money in doing that investment. So it's kind of hanging around, and we probably need to do something a little intermediate, or maybe a little bit better than just regular sitting in cash, which is absolutely earning nothing. But we probably need to add more to other investments. So that's going to be a big thing we're going to look at.
Frank, if I could add, one of the things you really need to pay attention to is this cash flow analysis that Kim has provided us with. That's a total of about $25 million a year more than we're sending out. When you hear people, and I get a lot, I've gotten a few calls, and you may have had some people ask you about how is the retirement system going to continue to survive in the future when all these big pay raises hit and people begin to retire after 3 years under this pay plan? How is the retirement system going to be able to handle that sort of increase in retirement benefits? And this is what the actuaries looked at and projected and analyzed in writing the bills that gave the pay raise to the troopers. And this accumulation that we're building up will go a long ways along with the investment of this money into the stocks and bonds that we normally invest in. That will earn money on top of these things. And over a 3-year period, we don't believe there will be many people that retire for the next 3 years. In fact, we've had some people that have called and wanted to look at retiring in the next year or two. And when Kim and I do the estimates and we have them checked by the computer program we use, the anti-spiking provision in our state statutes comes into play. With that spiking, anti-spiking says that you cannot increase your retirement final average salary by more than 25% in any 1 year in your final 3 years. And when you retire in either 16, 17, or 18, before 3 years under the new pay plan, that spiking provision comes into play. And I have seen, Kim, I believe we've noted that there have been penalties anywhere from 1.5% to 5% per monthly benefit for these troopers that are thinking about retiring. And once they see the numbers, all of them then understand it's going to probably be to our best interest to work an additional 3 years after June the 5th of 2018. So it's going to be interesting to see how these things play out, but this should give some comfort to those people who are concerned about the future solvency and the financial affairs of this retirement system. This will go a long ways towards protecting us.
It's a great situation to be in.
It is a good situation. We have to be good stewards and invest this money wisely. That's the key to everything.
All right, so Does anybody have any questions for me?
I need a separate motion to recommend a new international growth manager in Wellington, or
Yeah.
just to approve this meeting minutes.
Yes, that would be good. And I would recommend what most of my systems do, is to recommend that you invest, provided you can get a comfort level with their contract. Because we review the contract, and they always negotiate some terms, so if you have that in your motion, that gives a little clout to negotiate the contract.
Okay. All
Okay.
right, I'll make that motion to negotiate a contract for the new international growth manager to be Wellington Management.
All right, motion by Kevin, second by Ms. Sammy. Is there any objection? I see none, so moved.
And then I move that we accept the minutes of the meeting.
Motion by Ms. Amy to accept the minutes, second by Bobby. Any objection to the motion? I see none, so moved.
Frank, before we move to the next item, I think this may be a good place to, we're gonna need a change on 2 of the investment committees. And the reason that I think this may be a good place is because one of the changes in May is gonna directly affect the RFP that I have to send out immediately following this meeting. So I need for the new investment committee to make a decision on meeting changes. So in March, we're scheduled for the 16th. And that date is not good with Mr. Bickham, so if a quorum is available for the 23rd or the 30th, then we'll need to reschedule that investment committee for that day.
I'm good on either day.
Looks like I'm going to move the table as well.
You know,
Let me check my schedule. Kim, I think I'll be gone on 30th, 23rd, let me check. I'll let you know this afternoon.
Okay.
Both days you think you'll be gone?
I know I'll be gone on the 30th, but I'm not sure about the 23rd.
Yeah, either one of those days. Frank, what about you?
I think I'm good on the 23rd.
Okay, y'all wanna go with the 23rd?
Tentatively?
Because if we have 1, 2, 3, 4, we do have a quorum.
you okay?
Okay, so March will be rescheduled for the 23rd, and I'll send you guys a notice. Okay, the important one for the RFP is the May one. Okay, now we're scheduled, this is the date that's gonna go in the RFP, which is why I need this date approved especially today. Currently, we're scheduled for the 18th. That is a conflict, so we need to reschedule it for either the 11th or the 25th of May.
I'm talking on the 11th or the what?
Or the 25th.
The other days is good for me.
Either. Okay.
I prefer the second.
Okay.
You come back that night?
Come back the 23rd. No, come back. I'll speak on the 27th, I'm coming back on the same day.
The original one was the 18th.
Pull up that other day she just said.
Frank, are you good for May the 11th?
Should be unless I'm testifying in committee.
Okay, so that is the day that's going to be included in the RFP for verbal presentations.
Kim, I'm good on both those days that you asked.
Okay,
So
good.
May the 11th, right?
Yes. So as soon as this meeting is over, I will go in and plug in this May 11th date, and the RFP will go out today. So just to let the board know.
Does that give us enough time to make a decision and have someone in place for July?
Yes, we know it's an aggressive schedule, but Rob and I and Kim have talked about it. Rob, I think you've been involved in some of these things. It will be very aggressive, but it will be a much cleaner break if we can do the entire year with a new custodial bank. That would mean starting out July 1 with whoever the selected custodian is, as opposed to having 1 quarter with the old custodian and 3 quarters with the new custodian. It would clean up everything, I think, from the standpoint of our audit there.
That's it?
That's it.
Under tab 4 is the flash report. Ms. Robbins?
Well, I guess I'll stand up. It goes backwards with me, so. All right, well, I do have numbers here for January, just a couple of comments, especially since Amy pointed out the December number and January number. As I'm sure you all can imagine, is a little bit different a little bit worse in terms of just the overall market conditions. Just to give you a quick update, market in general, the S&P year-to-date as of this morning is down almost 6%. So that's where the markets are. I know everybody's seen the tumultuous ride we've been on here in the last few weeks. Couple of positive notes just real quick on the economy and what our guys think. They still anticipate 3.3% global growth. They've got a 70% probability for 2016 on positive U.S. GDP growth. They do expect in terms of rate hikes that those will come much slower and not quite as aggressive as initially the Fed talked about. So anyway, that's kind of putting things in perspective. Now let's talk about the January numbers. And if you look at your flash report here, in terms of the allocation, which you guys mentioned a little bit on the cash side, but if you look at your total equities there, you're at 58%, well within your target. You see you're a little over 358 million. Looking at your fixed income, you're at 19.5%, again, within your targets, 16% on your alternatives, and again, this is at the end of January. And then I show about 40 million in cash here. I'm sure there's some other funds that are not accounted for in our report, I would assume. Total at the end of January, 618,304,534. So that's the total dollar values. If you want to flip over, we can take a look at some performance numbers here. I'm going to focus on this fiscal year-to-date column and just roughly make some comments here. Kind of look at your total domestic equity piece, fiscal year-to-date. Down 10.8%. There's some managers who have performed well and offered some downside protection, but regardless, the markets are not responding the way we hope right now. So down 10.8% on your domestic equity managers fiscal year to date. On your international piece, and the international piece has struggled even more, not just in the markets in general. Concerns about China, oil prices, all those buzz topics have dramatically affected international. So your total international equity piece, including both your emerging market and your international managers, down 16.13% fiscal year to date. And Aberdeen is in there as well, which obviously that is going to be in transition here relatively soon. Looking at the total equity piece, right below that, yellow bar there, total equity managers down 12.42%. That's fiscal year to date as well. On the fixed income side, fixed income, if you look at your total fixed income down there on the yellow bar, fiscal year to date down 2.19%. Flipping over, and stop me anytime if you have questions. If we look at the total portfolio, those are the next section you see. We've got all your alternatives there. Those are always on a time lag, so I'll skip right to your total fund. Total fund fiscal year to date down 7.7%. That's where we're sitting right now as of January 31. And then since inception, which goes way back, 7.17%, positive 7.17%. So that number obviously doesn't get affected as much because you're looking long-term and asset allocation looks good long-term. And our long-term, none of our economic, despite this tumultuous time, our long-term estimates remain the same because they're long-term and they're based on sound asset allocation policies, not the bumps in the road. Can I answer any questions on?
Mr. Chairman, if I could maybe ask you to turn back another page there, and I'd like to go over the Act 1004. This is the legislative Act 1004 comparison chart that we provide each quarter to the board and to others. We provide this to the legislative committees in the House and the Senate, and it kind of reflects how we're doing relative to the other systems. It sounds horrible when you say we're down 7% or 7.8%, and it is. It's a very devastating impact. And these types of this type of volatility is what makes it so difficult for some people to understand why we keep defined benefit plans when all of the burden of guarantee is on the state, the employer, and not on the individuals who participate in these systems. But these numbers are through the 12/31 of 2015. If you look at the top four, there's 4 state systems there, the lasers. You can see that at the fiscal year to date return at that time, they were down 5.2. ELSERs, the student employees, were down 3.67. We were down 3.52. And teachers was down 3%. One of the things that you'll notice about these comparisons is that from time to time, various systems will be doing better, relatively speaking, than other systems. One of the ones that has improved a lot in terms of their relative performance is teachers. They were down very poorly last year, earlier in the year, but as a result of the fourth quarter, they look better. So interesting just to take a look and see how we compare short-term and intermediate term and then the 10-year returns also. Only comment I would make under the statewide systems, I guess I would call your attention to some of the ones that stand out because of relatively poor performance. And one of them is the firefighters' retirement system. You can see their performance long-term. Our numbers and the other state systems are up in excess of 5%. They're up less than right at 3%. So you take those kind of changes, about a 60% differential there, and you compound those things over a 10-year period of time, and you can have a major impact on the funding position and the performance of the retirement system. On the last page of this comparison, I would just call your attention to another one of the systems who, from a relative standpoint, has begun to perform much better. In the last 2 or 3 years, the sheriff's system has underperformed. But if you compare them to the statewide systems as well as to the 4 state systems, their numbers have improved pretty dramatically. So things change over time. Different managers can have an impact, different asset allocations can have an impact, and of course the market movements in some of these individual asset allocation strategies can make a difference. So thought this would be interesting to you. We'll continue to provide it to you on a quarterly basis. And if you have any questions, I'd be glad to try to answer them for you.
Any questions? Move on to financial report, tab 5.
Okay, tab number 5 is right here. The first 4 pages are the December and January check registers, and I'll just note any that are out of the ordinary for our office expenses. On the first page, December, we have a few disability medical expenses related to Benoit and Coates. I didn't have anything to note on the second page. That very first page of January's check register towards the bottom, I have 3 refunds, one for Mr. Jimmy Rogers, one for Mr. Ricardo Moore, and one for Miss Lacey Weimer. Again, on the second page, a disability medical expense for Coates. Other than that, these are all of our usual monthly expenses for payroll and office building expenses. The next page should be the statement of planned net assets for January 31st. And there's a human error there because it actually extends onto the second page, which it shouldn't. So that the second page of this report has the total that I'm going to give to you, which is the net assets held in trust for pension benefits, which is just over $617,754,000 there. The next page is the statement of changes in planned net assets. Just a little out of order. I thought it was when I pulled it out. So anyways, the next page is the statement of changes in planned net assets, which has the revenues at the top and then the expenses underneath. And as you can see in that very first column, our unrealized losses, we really took that hit in January, as Robin discussed. So that's leaving us with a monthly and net decrease of over 27 million. The next page is the budget summary for the 7 months ending January 31st. I really didn't have any, I think we're in line with all of our categories here. Of course, we have our quarterly investment consultant, custodial fees and investment manager fees, which always look a little bit skewed because they are paid quarterly. But otherwise, I think we're right on track in all of our other categories. Nothing to note there. And then that very last page with the JP Morgan balance report, I'll just read that total for the record. $618,375,722. Does anybody have any questions?
Any questions on the financial report?
Mr. Chairman, if I might just make a comment about the budget summary, the second to last page there that Kristen just reviewed with you. In light of the audits that was just highlighted in the newspaper here in Baton Rouge, audit of the clerks of court, the clerk of court here in Baton Rouge, Mr. Doug Welburn, audited his office and found expenditures of over $100,000 for meals that, whether it was business related or personal related, I think you need to look at these things and you need to ask questions of Kim and myself and Kristen if you have those kind of questions. But just to point out, our entire travel, seminar, meeting, entertainment type of expenses for the year is $12,000. For the first 6 months or first 7 months, our budget was $7,000. We actually spent $6,185, which most of that was done at the LSPRB conference down in New Orleans, as we had travel and meals down there. But I just wanted to reassure you that I know Kim and I talk about this all the time, but one of the most important things we can do is realize that every penny we spend for anything other than benefits for our retirees is money that has to be questioned, that has to be looked at, because every dime that's not spent on those retirees is money I would question whether or not we're doing the right thing with it. And I know we watch this very carefully and try to do the right things, but if you ever see anything that you feel you need to question, I hope you'll feel comfortable calling us to answer and explain anything that you may see on here that you're not comfortable with. But I think, as Kristen said, we do about as tight a job as I can imagine of managing the budget and maintaining our fiduciary responsibilities to you as well as to the retirees that we serve. That's the only comment I have.
Any questions? Can I get a motion to accept the financial report? Motion by Ms. Amy, second by Bobby. Any objection? See none? So moved. Legislative update?
Okay, y'all have this under tab 6. This is a summary that I created of the legislation that could possibly impact the state police retirement system. Kim has highlighted in yellow on the last page the 2 bills that are ours. So you know, those are the 2 that y'all authorized us to proceed with and you're supporting. Do y'all want me to go bill by bill and explain what they are? I'll be happy to do that.
Are we going to say support, not support type thing now, or are we going to wait?
I met with the other system directors yesterday afternoon, the other 3 system directors there for the teachers, state employees, and school employees. And other than the bills we sponsor ourselves, this board sponsors, and Denise will talk about those 2 bills in particular, and they're highlighted on your, I think, the last page of the report here. Kim has highlighted those 2 bills, Senate Bills 10 and 12. Other than those, I think the most important thing that we can say at this point in time is that we don't have sufficient information in front of us to help us take a position either in support of or in opposition to any of the bills other than the ones that we are supporting ourselves as the board of this system. That would be the thought process, and it's consistent with what teachers and lasers and school employees are doing also. There's a lot of maneuvering and changing that takes place over the next few weeks as we begin this session. A lot of times the legislator will have a bill that appears to do one thing, and it might be what they call a placeholder, and they can come back and make changes to that bill and add amendments to that bill and completely change the nature of what they're trying to accomplish. So we'll be watching that very carefully. My recommendation would be that we simply sponsor or support those two that the board is sponsoring, and that we withhold any positions until we have further understanding there about these bills. And I don't know how you want to handle that, Frank. Normally the board will grant Frank and myself the authority to take a position in opposition to the bills if we think it's in the best interest of the retirement system. But I would leave that up to your discretion there for you, how y'all would like us to move.
Our next regular session, our meeting is in April.
Yes.
Okay, so I don't know, we can't defer till then. I mean,
I think if there's anything critical, that we probably could.
yeah.
Yeah, because the real session doesn't start till sometime in
March
March.
14th, 15th,
So we should have some,
Yeah.
yeah.
Better feel about it.
All right.
Would you like me to verbally review? It doesn't matter if you wanted to.
Hit the highlights.
If you don't object, yeah,
I'll say
I'd
it.
like to hear.
Okay, yeah. So, House Bill 14 is a bill that just would replace our ex officio members, would no longer be the committee chairman for the retirement committee, would be the House, Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate would be the ex officio, and they could then have somebody come in their place like the retirement committee people have had. Not that they would be voting, but, House Bill 15 is very similar to some other bills. It's very similar to our Senate Bill 10. These all relate to providing a way to put the administrative expenses into normal cost. You know, Charles Hall talked to us about that at the last board meeting. So our Senate Bill 10 does that just for state police. All of these other three, House Bill 15, House Bill 47, and Senate Bill 5, all do it for all of the state systems. So I think we're going to just sit back and watch and see if one of the bills gets through that does it for everyone, and if not, then our bill would be pushed. House Bill 21 is similar to extent to Senate Bill 18 and Senate Bill 20. This is by Jones, and it requires certain amortization periods for certain state retirement system debts. I owe Kim, I'm going to send you a memo about what I talked about with Charles Hall, but Charles did indicate that this was something that the actuaries had all discussed, and they'd heard that something like this needs to be done, so I think that there's some support for it, but it's been presented in several different fashions. House Bill 32 by Representative Jones would provide for a COLA to be granted to eligible retirees payable July 1st of this year from the experience account up to a maximum of 2%, with an additional amount up to 2% for those over 65. The COLA would be payable only on the first $60,000 of a benefit, and your actuary did indicate that you have enough funds in the experience account to pay that. Then House Bill 33 is similar, but it just says that this COLA can be granted by the board without the legislature's authority. Because we already, remember they passed a law the last year or two that requires legislative authority for COLAs. So, House Bill 45 and House Bill 46 are constitutional amendment proposals by Representative Ivey. They both, I think, relate to the hybrid retirement plan that Ivey is also proposing in another bill. This removes the guarantee of retirement benefits for state employees in certain circumstances, and it would not remove it for the pension plan. So if there's another plan created, it removes the guarantee for that. And they're talking about a type of defined contribution plan that Ivey is recommending as well. 46, the constitutional amendment would require new hires to share certain of the retirement costs equally with the employer. And it appears to be a companion to the hybrid retirement plan proposal too. House Bill 47 is similar to House Bill 15, Senate Bill 5, Senate Bill 10. That's the amortizing the administrative expenses and normal costs. And House Bill 48 would, by Ivy, would add citizens unaffiliated with the retirement system on the board. It would allow the President of the Senate to appoint one, the Speaker of the House to appoint one, and the Legislative Auditor to appoint one. And they'd serve for a 4-year term each.
To sit on all the boards?
All the state boards.
That's a lot more chairs we have to fill.
Yeah. Then, House Bill 48 by Representative Ivy is similar to House Bill 45 and 46. This is about the payment of making new hires pay more in contributions, and this is only going to be valid if the constitutional amendment is passed. They're trying to get the employee to pay more of the cost. House Bill 50 is a very complex bill. It establishes a tiered accrual rate for new members of state system. And this 150 would start July 1st, 2018 for new hires as of that date. House Bill 51 is the same type thing, but it would start this year. And I understand by, oh, well, no, that's not, I'm reading that wrong. But House Bill 50, the tiered accrual rate, that would just start next year, and that is lower. You'll have a lower accrual rate the first few years you work, up to like 14 or 15 years, and then after that you'd have a higher accrual rate. I understand that that was really more aimed at lasers because they have a lot of people that work in the system for a shorter period of time. Charles Hall said that for most state police officers, if over the time that you usually stay retired, you probably average about the same kind of benefit. Because once you've worked over 14 years, then the accrual rate is even higher than what it is now.
Okay, well, that was actually calculated by someone at my last pension meeting of school employees. And it's pretty much, for state employees, you get 2.5% accrual rate, where y'all are at 33 1/3, but just to give you an idea, normally, this is ours, 2.5%. You would have to work 34 years and still only get 2.34. Like the 35th year would be, you'd be, or maybe earning a little bit more.
Okay.
So in other words, it sucks. You know, but anyway,
Okay.
excuse for my language.
Okay.
You know, I mean, it's to promote people to have long-term employment with the state.
Okay. Now, House Bill 51 requires each state retirement system actuary to be approved by the Louisiana Legislative Auditor. The Legislative Auditor's Office is actually supposed to come up with at least 3 actuaries that they approve, and then the state systems would have to use one of them.
Now, from what I understand on this one, it's kind of like what they do with the auditors that we can choose from. So, you know, again, it's an opinion by someone. Go ahead.
Yeah. House Bill 62 by Ivy sets minimum employer contributions and provides for funding deposit accounts for each state retirement system. The statewide, many of the statewide systems already have a funding deposit account for purposes. You already have an experience account for COLAs. That was one of the purposes. So for this, it would establish a funding deposit account to allow you to pay down the unfunded accrual or contribute towards the employer contribution.
So that would be if the employer, if right now the employer is at, say, 24%, the employer has to. So next year we did really well and it goes down to 20. We can say that our floor is 22. So they, even though it would technically fall to 20, but because our floor is there, they'd have to pay 22, and then we get to bank the 2% and use it to pay down various things. Yeah, there's 4 things, and technically, I think it's written that the board chooses the items they would like to do. Now, I'm sure that could get morphed as time morphs, so, but anyway.
Then House Bill 65 is that new hybrid retirement plan that Ivy's proposing. And then, and it would begin next year. And then House Bill 66 is the same hybrid, but it would begin this year. Then Senate Bill 2.
Denise,
Yeah.
before we go any further, if I could make a comment, please. Concerning those bills, there are about 8 or 10 bills there you'll notice by Representative Barry Ivy. And I mentioned at the beginning, I think it's one of the executive committee meetings, I had mentioned the Louisiana Association of Business and Industry agenda. This is a part of their agenda. Representative Ivy is working with LSPRB as well as with PAR, Public Affairs Research Council. And these are ways that they feel like the retirement structure going forward should be. It would take away the guarantee of the state, as Barry is attempting to do on some of these bills. It would tend to put more of the burden of responsibility for a retirement benefit on the individual as opposed upon the employer. And this is primarily what has taken place in the private sector. I served on a committee about 26, 27 years ago at our bank that terminated our defined benefit plan. And we did it for one reason, cost. And that's what these bills are aimed at, reducing costs and reducing the guarantee of the state. It's also, Representative Ivy is working very closely with a group called the Pew Foundation. The Pew Foundation is very interested in seeing that defined benefit plans do not continue. And they are funding and kind of focusing some of his thoughts into these bills that he's providing here. It's going to be a very, very contentious situation, and I would just say that what concerns me as much as anything is the turnover in the House Retirement Committee, where these bills will be heard initially, has been pretty significant this year, and many of the legislators who were serving on the House Retirement Committee that were very supportive of the state retirement systems have moved on. They're no longer on those committees, and it will be a totally new committee. I would dare say that these bills will have a reasonably decent chance of getting out of that committee. And we've been told that on the Senate side, if these bills do get out, they will not be opposed in the Senate. So I don't know how all of this is going to play out, but you need to be following this very carefully. We will attempt to monitor and to keep you informed about how these things are going. Because I think these 8 or 10 bills, I don't know if they'll get out and pass this year, but they will have a big, big impact on the future design and implementation of retirement systems in the state of Louisiana.
Now, I also heard from, as soon as our Representative Ianni went to teachers' retirement system and talked to the board there, and there were some people there, in addition to Elsers, Lauren was there, and so was Charles. He kept referencing to, I got $500 million that because what would make a lot of this stuff work that he wants to do is if the UAL is paid down. And he says he's got the money somewhere in the general fund that he has a plan that $500 million could be used to pay down the UAL.
Yeah, he did make that same comment at the meeting I attended down at the state capitol with Barry Ivy and Lobby and PAR and the other state system directors. He made that same comment that he had a commitment of $500 million toward paying down the unfunded accrued liabilities, in particular of lasers and teachers.
Right.
And in this state where we've got about a $1 billion shortfall this year and about a $2 billion shortfall in 2017, it's hard for me to imagine where anybody could come up with $500 million that they would simply use to pay down the unfunded accrued liabilities. It'd be wonderful.
It would be.
If that could happen.
Yes.
But I don't see that happening. But this is what we're up against.
But there's a give and take here somehow, because it's cost effective. I mean, it's cost. And, if you have a cost, you're supposed to find the revenue to find the other side. So
He's got
I still think he's putting ideas out there that would, maybe not this year, maybe not next year, but maybe, if we get our act together, we can probably see some of this coming down the line. So who knows? Keep your ears to the ground.
Thank you. Senate Bill 2 authorizes payments funded by the state systems experience accounts of certain retirees and beneficiaries of COLA. Senate Bill 5 was similar to those other bills about adding the administrative costs as part of the normal cost and amortization. Senate Bill 10 is our bill that that puts the administrative costs as administrative expenses as part of normal costs. That was what Charles Hall had recommended. So the Senate Bill 10 does it just for state police. And then Senate Bill 12 is our bill also just to fix some problems that were in our statutes. There's one place in the statutes that say we grant a partial disability, but we don't. So we are fixing that. Because it conflicted in the different sections in the statutes. Senate Bill 18 and Senate Bill 20 are very, very long and convoluted. They are supposedly a technical rewrite to fix a lot of different issues that they found in the retirement statutes, but they also do a few substantive things. And these are all things Charles indicated that I think Lobby is on board with, and some of the actuaries feel it's good practice to do. And there's just some minor difference between Senate Bill 18 and Senate Bill 20, so two different versions to see which one will get through. Any questions?
And has the time passed for the filing of retirement bills?
For pre-filing, it surely has passed. I think they have to be filed 60 days before they're introduced, so if you wanted to have it pre-filed to introduce on the first day, it's passed, you know. I guess theoretically, somebody could introduce and then it just wouldn't be filed until sometime in April, you know.
Any questions? Thank you for the great news. Move on to the financial.
Sorry, Amy, I thought I gave one.
Oh, I do.
She wanted two.
Oh, I got them all. Someone sneaked up.
She took mine.
I did, Bobby.
I think everybody's got one. Okay, won't take up too much of the time. Go briefly over the results for our audit. I apologize, I missed the last meeting due to a last minute conflict. Starting on page 1 and 2 is our audit report. On page 1, you see basically it discusses the report that we've issued. We've audited the financial statements as of June 30th, 2015 and 14, and the related notes, which make up the basic financial statements. Then goes on to discuss our responsibilities, management's responsibility, as well as the auditor's responsibility. Ultimately, management is responsible for the preparation and fair presentation of the financials in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. Our responsibility is to express an opinion on the financials based on our audit. We conducted the audits in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards and government auditing standards. And the most important part of that is the last paragraph on page 1. The opinions. In our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the financial position as of June 30, 2015 and 2014, and the changes in that position for the years then ended in conformity with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. That's what's known as an unqualified opinion. That's the highest form of opinion we can give on the financials. Going on to page 2, here's something new at the top of page 2, paragraph on emphasis of the matter. I believe many of you remember last year we implemented GASB 67, related to accounting and financial reporting for pensions. That required the plan itself to make additional disclosures as well as included additional schedules in the report. This year, GASB 68 was implemented. That now requires the retirement system to record his proportionate share of pension related to his participation in lasers. So this standard requires it to be implemented as of the earliest year retroactively presented as of the earliest year presented. So that resulted in a beginning decrease in net position of $775,936 at July 1, 2014. At the bottom of page 1, we talked about, we've also issued our report on our consideration of internal controls and compliance. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. Moving on to page, yes.
If I could back up just 1 second and ask you to maybe shed a little additional light on that comment that you just made about the implementation and the impact of $775,000. What's the practical implications of that? Is that as a result of reflecting the cost of the system on the?
That's what that is the result. It's your proportionate share of the net pension liability of lasers, as well as some, which we'll get into in a couple of minutes, deferred inflows and outflows related to pension. So that's why it ends up with that net effect of $775,000 at July 1, 2014. There are some additional, the net pension liability is a little different from that amount, which we'll look at in just a second.
I guess my question is in regard to, you're familiar with FASB, the Financial Accounting Standards Board, and the impact that they had on the private sector. When the private sector businesses begin to have to reflect the impact of the retirement system's liability on their income statement and balance sheets is when banks and other private companies decided they would no longer be in the defined benefit business. We're now operating under GASB in the government sector, the public sector. Is it your opinion that that's kind of where we're headed with the public sector as well as following behind the private sector there?
I would think so, yeah.
Yeah, that's my opinion also.
Yeah, I believe you're correct, yes.
And if you don't understand what we're talking about, when you begin to have to reflect the losses and gains on a monthly basis on your financial statements, it becomes very clear the impact of these problems of guaranteeing the state retirements. And this is in the private sector. When we begin to have to take that money out of our equity and reflect it on our balance sheet and income statement in the private sector, it didn't take us but about 6 months to a year to figure out we were not going to be able to handle that volatility that comes. It's okay when the market's moving up, but it's in these down markets and the downward volatility that these types of situations will become very, very difficult to deal with.
Okay, now on page 6, getting to the actual financial statements, where you'll see this in a second on the statement of fiduciary net position. You see the 2 years presented, 2015, and see that note restated for 2014. Again, that's as a result of the implementation of GASB 68. The items I'll note there on related to that, you see these new line items, deferred outflows of resources and deferred inflows of resources, as well as the net pension liability. You see at June 30th, 2014, the system had a net pension liability of $860,751, and at June 30th, 2015, $922,989 as a result of the participation in lasers. So that statement, as we were just talking about, that statement now requires you to record the impacts of that on your actual financials. See total net position at year end of $658.3 million, primarily cash and investments. Investments about $695.4 million compared to about $662.5 million in the prior year. Total liabilities of about $42.8 million as compared to about $45.6 million in 2014. Moving on to page 7, the statements of changes in fiduciary net position. Again, that, you'll see there at the bottom, on the 2014 column, the cumulative effect of the change in accounting principle as a result of that implementation. It reduced your beginning net position, your equity, as it is by about $775,936. Total income or net increase in net position for the year is about $36.3 million compared to about $101.7 million the prior year. And the vast majority of that is the difference in the net appreciation and fair value of investments between the 2 years. See, in 2015, only had about $13.9 million appreciation in investments as compared to about $89.2 million in 2014. So pointing out a few things again in the notes. I'll get to that. On page 24, and then again this is related to the implementation of GASB 68, those deferred inflows and deferred outflows of resources that I talked about a moment ago. Deferred outflows of resources basically being items that will reduce your net position that don't relate to the current year being presented, that won't be used up until future years. And the same way for deferred inflows, those are increases in net position that won't be realized until future years. And you see the makeup of those amounts recorded at June 30th, 2015. Deferred inflows of resources, $16,447 is difference between expected and actual experience of the system. $116,767 is the net difference between projected and actual earnings on investments, and $3,993 related to the changes in proportion and differences between your actual contributions and the proportionate share of contributions as actuarially determined. Deferred outflows, so that $143,021, again related to the change in proportion and difference between the employer contributions and proportionate share. And the $107,353 is the actual contributions that were made to lasers for in 2015 that was subsequent to the measurement date, which is actually June 30th of 2014. So that's the measurement date when the net pension liability is calculated is of June 30th, 2014. So those contributions that you made in 2015 are recorded as deferred outflows and will be expensed in future years. And again, on page 27, a note discussing that change in accounting principle. Talked about how that the beginning decrease in net position, the initial net pension liability offset by those deferred inflows and outflows. Another new item I'd like to point out that's required as a result of some legislation in 2014 is on page.
I'm sorry, if I might just clarify something, Amy was asking me a question, and just to be sure everybody understands, those liabilities that we're talking about here with lasers, that is for the 4 staff members here.
That's correct, the four
staff here, it's not for the troopers. The troopers' liability, in other words, the liability that your employer has would have to be reflected on the balance sheet and income statement of the Department of Public Safety.
That's correct.
These liabilities are for the 4 employees, myself, Kim, Shelley, and Tasha. As we do not belong to this system, we belong to the laser system, just to clarify that.
So we'll see another one of these for the Department of Public Safety?
No, they'll see it.
They'll see it?
Yeah.
Okay.
We won't see their liability. That's one of the reasons why we had to make some changes a few years ago when we recognized what liability was it there when you consider all the liabilities for all of the troopers for the future pension benefits? I mean, it is huge compared to what our system is.
Yeah, we had that issue with the implementation of the
Yeah.
OPEB, where that,
Yeah.
that amount was all, it was,
Changed everything.
it was combined in the 4 here as well as that, you saw that
Yeah.
amount of that
Yeah,
liability.
huge.
So another new requirement as a result of legislation in 2014 is this schedule on page 35. It's new required supplementary information. We're now required to present a schedule of compensation, benefits, and other payments that are made to the agency head for the fiscal year. And you see the breakdown of that on that page.
Too much. That's what I've been saying.
And finally, our report on internal control and compliance, which starts on page 39 and continues on page 40. In there, it talks about we've audited in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards and government auditing standards, the financial statements as of June 30th, 2015, as well as the notes, and have issued our report there on dated September 30th. The first section of the report here relates to internal controls over financial reporting. It's important to keep in mind that as part of the audit, we consider the internal controls of the system as part of determining our audit procedures, but not for the purpose of actually expressing an opinion on how effective those controls are. That's not part of what we're required to do, so accordingly we do not express any type of opinion on the effectiveness of internal controls.
Mike, if I could ask you a question about that. Hearing what Amy had to say a while ago about the focus that she would anticipate, and I would agree with her, concerning why the legislative auditor might want to get involved and actually do these audits themselves. What do you have any thoughts concerning how they might view our policies and controls that are in place? Do you have any feeling at all about, or have you heard anything at all about that?
I mean, as far as your specific,
Or just in general?
I agree with what you're saying. I think that is, or that's going to be what they're actually more concerned coming in and look at. I think I've seen that in other, not just retirement systems, other agencies, governmental agencies that we've been involved with, where they've done the same thing, come in and, you know, I'm not sure what the process is, how they determine who they're going to look at a particular point in time, but, you know, I think that's, as opposed to actual this financial side, obviously that's important, but I think, yeah, the ultimate emphasis is going to be on the areas.
Do you have any audits at your firm that would consider that type of focus on the controls?
Isn't that under another
Yeah,
letter or something?
yes,
However
yeah, that would be, you know, basically another type of engagement, an agreed upon procedures engagement. So where we come in, we do a number of those where you get with the client and you determine, you know, maybe we want to look at your areas of cash or payroll or whatever those may be, and you determine some procedures to look at to see if the actual policies and procedures that are in place are they effective and are operating as they should operate.
So this is kind of a general direction that audits are taking in some regards there to kind of follow up and see if those controls are proper.
Yeah, I think it's never a bad idea for that. I mean, there's always some, as good as you think things may be, there's always probably some room for some improvement or things you may want to take another look at that you haven't looked at previously. But in our opinion, as far as this system, I mean, based on what you said before about how bringing in Griffin and Company and everything, we've been very satisfied with the policies and procedures that you have in place as stands now. So we've never seen any major significant problems during the time that we've been here.
And I will add for the board's understanding that Kim and I have had conversations with Stephen Griffin and talking with him about how important it is that he maintains that objectivity and he provides a completely unbiased view of this situation here. If he sees something that I'm doing wrong, or he notices something that might be a weakness in the way Kim is doing certain things, we want to know about those things. We've always viewed, I think, our auditors as some of our best friends. Some people take an adversarial position with auditors. never felt that way myself. It's very important that they become your best friend, and if there's any weaknesses, I would want to know about it before it becomes a problem. And I hope the board can be reassured about that as we go through this new audit procedure.
Yeah, and I agree. It's great to have someone in there like that, because as auditors, we can't actually come in and help you design those policies and procedures, but that would then impair our independence. So, but to have that other firm, as another set of eyes and ears, I would definitely recommend. So again, as related to all those things being considered, we did not identify any internal control deficiencies. That's the bottom line as far as our looking at internal control over financial reporting. Continuing on page 40, again, as part of obtaining reasonable assurance about whether the financial statements are materially fairly stated, we are required to perform tests of compliance with certain laws, regulations, contracts, grants, etc., though non-compliance with which could have a direct and material effect on financial statements. Again, however, we don't provide an opinion on compliance with those provisions. Again, we're pleased to report that the results of our test disclose no instances of non-compliance that are required to be reported under government auditing standards. So, and that pretty much concludes my presentation. Again, as Erwin stated earlier, our contract is now up. The legislative auditor will be continuing. I'm not sure how long that period. We'd love to be back here at some point again in the future, if we can, and just like to thank Erwin and Kim and the board and everyone here for the cooperation throughout the years that made our job really easy to come in.
And speaking with Mike about this meeting today, I assured him that the legislative auditor did not ask me whether I was satisfied with Hines and Macaluso, because I think they know that we've been well pleased with the job, Mike, you've done, and the people there. Please pass that along to Robert as well as Anthony, and let them know how much we appreciate the last 7 years that y'all have been our auditors on the outside.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you, sir. Any motion to accept the audit or?
I think you normally do, I mean, the audit is what it is.
Make a motion to accept.
I'll make.
Motion by Kevin, second by Bobby. Any objection? See none? So moved. All right. Item number 12, approval of elimination of awards benefits as follows. Tab 7.
Reappointment retirement, Samantha Descant retired January 4th, vested. The benefit amount of $2,854.82. The approval elimination awarding benefits to spouse and or children. Florida Alexander, date of death February the 8th. Benefit amount was $1,802.17. She was the surviving spouse of Matthew. Eddie Kershaw, date of death was January the 8th. Benefit amount $2,229.42. Surviving spouse is Andrea. Rena Osborne, date of death October 26th. Benefit amount $233.19. She was the surviving spouse of Robert. Leon Colvin Badrine, date of death January the 19th. Benefit amount $2,846.84. Surviving spouse is Jeannie. And then Irma Weaver, date of death January the 30th. Benefit was $1,323.26, and she is the surviving spouse of Earl.
Can I get a motion to accept?
I'll move.
Motion on Sandy, second by Kevin. Any objection? See none? So moved. Mr. Director, any other business?
Yeah, one other item of business, we didn't cover it when the financial report was given by Kristen Leto, but that was at her request. Kristen has made it known to Kim and I and to her employer there with Griffin and Associates that she will be leaving the firm. She has made a decision to change her lifestyle a little bit, and I think she's going to become more of a stay-home mother, taking care of 2 young boys that are needing more and more of her time, I think. And Kristen didn't want to say anything because I think she was afraid that she might get a little emotional. And quite honestly, it's never easy to see somebody leave who's been with us now, I guess, Kim, for almost 12, 13 years. And Kristen is like a member of our staff. She doesn't work for us, she works for you, but she's in here with us every week. She feels a part of this family here, and I hate to see her leave, quite honestly, but you know, behind every change that takes place with people, sometimes things seem to work out, and I've always found that when one thing changes and one person leaves, there's an opportunity for somebody else. And I gotta tell you that as bad as I hate to see Kristen leave, it's gonna give us a chance in a positive way to begin to work more and more with Stephen. Stephen is gonna come and be involved with us. He's a partner in the firm. It bears his name, Stephen Griffin and Associates. And it's at a critical time, and we've had conversations with Stephen because of these changes in the audit focus that the legislative auditor may be taking in the future. Stephen is going to play a bigger and a bigger role in providing the assurance to the legislative auditor that our books are in order and that our policies and procedures are in order. And I think it's, sometimes it works out for the best. And as much as I hate to say, I hate to see Kristen leaving, I am cautiously optimistic that this will work out in a very positive way for you and for us as we move forward into a new audit procedure there with the legislature. So, Kim, I'll let you follow up. I know you've maybe have some comments to say. I know how closely you've worked with Kristen, and the feelings are very strong, I think, between all of us and Kristen.
How long has Kristen been here?
She's been here about 12, 13 years.
I don't remember having before back.
Yeah.
When I first started on the board, Stephen was here.
Yeah, she still came, but he would come and present to the board.
Okay.
She would come into the office and work, and then he would come and present to the board. And then eventually, as she gained experience, he let her take on that role as well. So we were still seeing her, you know. I'm not sure how long I can talk about it, because her and I have already been for the last 2 weeks shedding tears over it. You know, every once in a while somebody comes along that just touches you. And she's one. I don't want to talk. I'm going to miss her terribly. She's more than just an employee.
And obviously she loves working here. I mean,
Yeah, it's going to be a loss that we're going to feel personally, not professionally. You know, I mean, we're going to keep going.
Well, it's good to have people like that can
Absolutely.
take care and you can trust. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially with audit, they play an important part of what goes on here in our system.
Yeah, I mean, you can't work with somebody for that long and not become attached to them, you know, and she and I just have always clicked. And so we're gonna miss her, but you know, we're gonna look at the positive and we're gonna keep in touch with her, so.
Absolutely. I just learned how to say the last name. I kept saying I want to say Alito, and she's leaving.
But other than that, those are the only other business that we have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you so much. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Amen.
Motion by Bobby,
Yeah.
second by Thurman. Any objection? I see none, so moved.